What's going on, guys? We're back, and today we're going to be finishing up the install on the turbo kit for the Hardbody, besides for exhaust. Basically, we're going to be doing the cold side, wastegate, oil return. So we got two couplers that I was needing. Okay, got a tiny bit of RTV. Probably not going to use much of this because we have the new oil pan gasket. Got the oil return bung, air filter, wastegate, oil return line, intercooler, and then obviously all of this piping, which we're not going to use a whole lot of. Just probably going to be using, I think, 2 pieces, which it'll be a straight and then one of the 45s up. But yeah, I'm really excited to get into this and just get this thing all finished up. We also have the intake air temp sensor over there. Right over there, it won't focus. That we're going to be installing into the side of this cap. Then we're also going to need to go grab a stud extender for this stud on the intake hat. I think that's it. And then we'll have to figure out how to relocate the coolant tank. Anyways, that's it. I'm excited to get into it. So we're going to start off by doing the oil return line. So we're going to start with draining the oil pan and then getting that pulled, which we have to take off 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts to drop this little piece of the frame, or the subframe, and then the oil pan will come out. Okay, so we have the oil drained. Next step is going to be removing the pan, but you have to remove this cross member, which is just held in by 4 19mm bolts with nuts and lock washers. So it's going to be pulling this and then removing all of the bolts for the oil pan to drop this. Okay, well, after a while, we finally got the oil pan off. After about 15 minutes of prying whatever the hell this is off, some sort of gasket, but yeah, it was some serious stuff. The shop that did this is overkill, and they lost a bolt, so they had to replace it with like a Phillips head bolt. But oil pan's off. So next step is going to be, we're going to have to clean up the underside of the block and then clean up all of this. And we'll have to fix this because obviously with the prying it kind of damaged the edge, but that's okay. And we'll completely clean this out, and then it will be using a step bit to drill a hole for that guy. So in the process of cleaning out the oil pan, once he's done cleaning out the oil pan, he's gonna drill a hole with a step bit so that we can get this guy installed. While he's doing that, I'm gonna go ahead and get the drain fitting, where is it, installed right there on the bottom of the turbo. What that's gonna look like is, take this guy, which is going to be this big old flange with a gasket, as well as this blue guy screwed into it, which has a -10 line, and then these 2 bolts will bolt into the bottom of the turbo, and then that will be our return fitting off the turbo. And then we'll have to fit up the oil return line, which we're just going to use a 45 and then a straight off the bottom of the turbo. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on all this. And she's on. Bolted up with the gasket, all nice and snug and tight. That's drying off. And then now we're in the process of making the oil return line. And once that's made, we'll be all set to drill the hole out of that, which, looking at this, it goes like that. It'll be drilled on this side, which is where the bung will sit. And then we'll get that all tightened up, and that will be our oiling completely done, which is good. So I think right now, in the meantime, I'm gonna go ahead and get the wastegate mounted up right there. Okay, we're back. So, wastegate is on. Porty dealy, might be a little bit of a a problem because it's so close to the block. But we might be okay, which is that's gonna plug up into here. Oh, you can't see that. Plug up into here. As well, so we got the oil pan back on. Use a little red silicone RTV and a cork gasket, as well as we got the bung in right there, which will plug up into there. So something I found, so with this kit, is that something you're gonna have to do is this can't be perfectly straight up and down, or at least when you're gonna be trying to put the oil feed on, if you're gonna go straight down, because it will go straight into the steering shaft. So what I did is I just loosened up the exhaust housing, tweaked it a tiny bit right, and then I was able to get this mocked up. So we made the oil return line. You are gonna have to trim this to get it to fit, because the provided one is very long. So right now we're gonna go ahead and get this installed, and we'll see what the situation is like with getting this perfectly back straight up and down. But oil pan's on, bung's on, and the wastegate's on. Oil line's on. Good. It works. Only thing I might be a little concerned about is you can see that there's a slight dip in that little bend. So something to keep in mind of is that on these oil pans, they're kind of shaped like this. So any bung you have flush, it's gonna point down. I think I'll be fine. I mean, there's only one way to find out, is to see if anything happens once I have exhaust hooked up and then I'm driving it. Filled it back up with oil, started it, let it idle for probably 15-20 seconds, and then shut it off. Nothing's leaking, which is good. So our next step, or my next step, is I have this off, and I'm going to be trying to mark up where I'm going to have the intercooler mounted right now. So our plan of attack for the intake hat is, since the stud was too short for this one, what we did is we chopped the stud. Obviously, once I have it, we'll show you. Chopped the stud, and then we had a little extendo piece, so it was a female to female connector, right? And then we're gonna have a bolt come down the top, and then since we don't want a bolt and then a wing nut, we're gonna chop the bolt head off the top of the bolt so that it's just threads, so that we'll be able to have 2 wing nuts. So that's what my grandpa's working on right now. I'm gonna be working on figuring out intercooler, because then we're gonna need to cut here, relocate this, and that'll be figuring out couplers and then piping. Okay, so before I talk about what we did with this little stud guy, we're starting work for the intercooler. So what we ended up doing, just so it's easier to get in and out, is that I removed the headlight housing, which is 4 bolts, and then unbolted the radiator up here. Now it's just sat in those rubber pegs, and we're able to push it out of the way so that we're able to slide the radiator in. See, you dinged up, or we're able to slide the intercooler in, sorry. You see we dinged up the radiator a little bit. Is what it is. I mean, it's not like we're destroying it. You can see where here is where we cut. So just chopped all of this out, and then we're gonna relocate this coolant tank, and then same thing over here. Okay, so we kind of reached the flow state just a little bit. We got everything on. We'll do a little walk around. So, intercooler. We have it mounted with the inlet on the top side of the intercooler. With these brackets that are provided, they're the flat, straight pieces with the 2 slits. We bent it right about here, and then bolted in, and then we use self-tappers to just straighten the frame. Same thing on the other side. Works very good. So this kit does not come with a coupler to come off the turbo. The turbo has a 2-inch outlet, and it comes with 2.5-inch pipe. So you will need a 2-inch to 2.5-inch coupler. Okay, so we got that. Then we only used 2 straight pieces. Okay, we had to cut these about, give or take, probably like 7 or 8 inches off. cut those off. We just have the hose clamps in just for dry fit. I have a bead rollers coming tomorrow, so that's what we're gonna do, is we're gonna roll a bead for this side and then this side, which is where we cut. So coming off the turbo, and then I just have this mocked up because that port coming off the wastegate goes straight into the block, which will not work. That doesn't work because this hose is gonna end up straight onto the block, which is just gonna melt the block. So I'm not 100% sure. I mean, like, I know this is universal kit, but like that's just something to keep in mind. So we're gonna have to figure out something with that. Either I'm gonna mount the wastegate 180 degrees, so whatever exhaust shop I get this taken to, they're gonna have to do a little more work on plumbing in the recirculating wastegate, because I'm not gonna do a screamer pipe because it's loud and obnoxious and it doesn't sound that great on these motors. But that's what we're gonna have to figure out. Only other thing we need to do now is plumb in the boost gauge. So anyways, moving on. Comes into the intercooler with the provided 90, and these are all the provided hose clamps. The hose clamps that it comes with are 76 millimeter hose clamps. It will not work on this 2-inch. They are too big. So we just have this smaller hose clamp on the turbo. We have another 90 degrees. We had to remove, obviously, the coolant reservoir. Another 90 degree, which is a little bent, which comes up into another straight right here. And then I purchased this coupler. It is a 22 degree, and this goes into the intake hat. But yeah, she's pretty much done. Yeah, looks great. Just need to kit up, put the grill back on, and then air filter. And that's pretty much it. She's boosted. Okay, so real quick, touching on what we did for the intake hat. What we did is we chopped this front stud pretty short, took this female to female coupler, then took a bolt that screwed into this coupler, which I believe was a quarter inch 20 thread pitch, coarse thread. Threaded a ginormous bolt down and then cut it to length. So that, if I could try and get this, it was a bit of a pain in the butt to get off. Oh, it needs to go that way. One second. There we go. And then, now that it's on, you could see, boom, got wing nut 1. Let me zoom this out a little bit. There we go. Wing nut 1, and then et voila, wing nut 2. Boom. That's the intake hat. All right, I'm gonna leave it off there. All that I have left to do is unbolt my gauge cluster and remove it so that I can plumb up my boost gauge. And then after that, it's gonna be figuring out the intake air temp sensor, which I think I'm gonna do that another day. And then the wastegate, which I need to figure out what to do with that as well. But those will be for another day. It's already about 5:30. Started work on it at 8 this morning. Been a long day. Super duper proud of how far we've come today with this. But yeah, I'm gonna leave it off there. Once again, I appreciate you watching. I don't know what I'm doing with the Zoom. I appreciate you watching, sticking around, and just watching me do this thing. So next steps are going to be finishing those things I mentioned: the intake air temp sensor, the wastegate, and then it's going to be getting this thing to an exhaust shop so that I could get my exhaust made. Downpipe, recirculating wastegate. That's about it. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.